which is, I think, basically what this slide says. So I think we already discussed it. I do like this quote, though. The left does not have a monopoly on the critiques of capitalism. And given its present historical weakness, there's a great danger in the rise of reactionary forms of anti-capitalism. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, that even some of the folks that are starting to speak out against capitalism right now, if they're not specifically pushing a leftist, eco-socialist, freedom and democracy for all sort of message, those anti-capitalist messages can actually end up supporting, fascism and the continuation of oppression and suppression and all these things. And unfortunately, as the second quote says, many of the progressive I always think progressive Democrats, they lack an explanation on why social democracy. Think of the New Deal. That was a big deal for the Democrats. They fail to have an explanation on why social democracy failed. It failed in this country. The New Deal and unions and things like that have been systematically dismantled in the US over the last number of decades and replaced by extreme neoliberalism, focus on market capitalism. And so why did it fail? Well, I think, like we talked about in our myths, it failed because it tried to dress up capitalism and say, well, we'll make some safety nets and things, but it never addressed the underlying problems that we talked about with the market imperatives and private property and exploitation of labor and all that. It never really addressed those issues. So of course it failed and got replaced by more ridiculous versions of capitalism. So that's why we need eco-socialism. Go ahead, Chris.
And because, the New Deal was essentially, a life raft for capitalism. It wasn't in any way really offering any kind of challenge to capitalism. What it did was put up, state-sponsored buttresses. So, as capitalism was failing, and the Great Depression was really showing the failures of capitalism, the New Deal came in, and while it did provide a lot of public jobs for a relatively short period of time, it didn't challenge private ownership, right? So it was only a matter of time, right? If you leave your enemy, intact, the pushback is going to happen. And it really took a generation, right? Once a generation passed and a generation or two passed, and you don't remember how huge and how important the New Deal was, you stop defending it, right? And then Reagan can come in and really do some damage. But then you get to us, right? We're 80 years out from the New Deal, and many of the core programs of the New Deal, millennials and Gen Z aren't convinced we're going to get to realize them, right? Social Security may be gone and defunct. And it was, that was one of the core central things. So it's been damaged to the point that, future generations don't have the nostalgia that past ones did. And we don't have it because our whole lives, it's been very apparent that we weren't going to be included in those, those programs. Those programs were going to be funded by us and, drained by the time it got to be our thing.
Yep.